In this video, we're going to talk about properties of trigonometric graphs. So let's first look at the sine graph. Here is what the sine graph looks like, so let's discuss some of its properties. The domain, in this case, is negative infinity to infinity because there's no values of x that we can't have. But the range is more restricted, and it's negative 1 to 1 with the 1's included, because that, as you can see, the function doesn't go past 1 or negative 1 on the y-axis. The y-intercept is 0, 0, because it is at the origin, and the x-intercept is n pi comma 0, because it intercepts the x-axis at every multiple of pi, so 0, pi, 2 pi, etc. The period is 2 pi because the graph repeats every 2 pi. So as you can see, from negative 2 pi to 0, we have it go up and then down. And from 0 to 2 pi, we have it go up and then down. And the amplitude, which is the distance from the x-axis to as high or as low as the graph goes, is 1, because we go from 0 to 1 or 0 to negative 1. For the cosine, the graph looks very similar to the sine graph, but it has all been shifted. So the domain, again, is negative infinity to infinity because there's no values of x that we can't have. The range is also restricted from negative 1 to 1, including those 1's. As we can see that there's no values of y past 1 or negative 1. The y-intercept is 0, 1, because it crosses the y-axis at that point. And the x-intercept is pi over 2 times n, comma 0, because it crosses the x-axis at multiples of pi over 2. So pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, etc. The period is also 2 pi, because from negative 2 pi to 0, we start up, we go down, we come back up. From 0 to 2 pi, we start up, we go down, we come back up. And the amplitude, again, is 1. So let's look at our tangent graph. As we can see, the domain is not all real numbers because not all of the x values are possible because we have these asymptotes. So we write it as all real numbers except for x cannot equal pi over 2 plus n times pi. So this means x cannot equal pi over 2 plus then all multiples of pi. So that would be pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, etc. The range is negative infinity to infinity because there's no values of y that we can't have. The x-intercept is n pi comma 0 because it crosses the x-intercept at multiples of pi. The y-intercept is 0, 0. There's asymptotes at x equals pi over 2 plus n times pi. And you can see that's the restriction we put on our domain because there's no x values there. And the period is only pi because you can see from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2 we have our graph, and then from pi over 2 to 3 pi over 2 that same graph repeats. So that's only a distance of pi between each graph. So our cotangent looks sort of like our tangent graph, but it has been moved over and each of the little individual functions have been flipped. So normally we start negative on the left side and positive on the right, and now we start positive on the left and negative on the right. So the period is pi again. As you can see, between 0 and pi we have our graph, and then from pi to 2 pi we repeat that same graph. The domain will have restrictions on it because not all values of x are possible because of these asymptotes. So the domain will be all real numbers except x cannot equal n times pi, so any multiple of pi, which is where our asymptotes are. The x-intercept will be pi over 2 plus n pi comma 0. So it crosses the x-axis at multiples of pi over 2. The range is from negative infinity to infinity because all values of y are possible. The y-intercept is none because we can see that we have an asymptote along the y-axis, so there'll never be a point there. The asymptote is x equals n times pi, so the asymptotes are on all the multiples of pi. For the information on the cosecant and secant graph, see the properties of trigonometric graphs, part 2.